What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, May 5th, 2021, hump day, middle of the weekday, starting that long, slow glide down to Powwow on a Friday. A lot of stuff going on today. First of all, happy Cinco de Mayo. And we're going to do news until we run out of news. And at that point, we're going to open up the phone lines. And a quick comment about the phone lines. I have a feeling a lot of the listeners don't understand the way the phones work. We only have 5 lines, and when they're all filled and you call on in, it'll sound like it just disconnects. So that means just try, wait for a caller to get off the show and try in again, and we'll get you on the air this time. Anyway, Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when we get into that part of the show. Today is also the 60th anniversary of Alan Shepard's flight into space on board Freedom 7, and he was the first American in space, and he was one of the original 7 astronauts, and a lot of people think, he was a hero, and he was, but not because of the Freedom 7 flight. Alan Shepard, shortly after that flight, developed an ear condition that gave him vertigo, and he was taken off flight status, but he stayed with NASA, stayed working with the astronauts in a management role until finally a surgery was developed that cured him of his ear problem, and then he got to finally go to the moon on Apollo 14. So talk about perseverance and sticking with it, and that is why I think Shepard really is a hero, because of just how long he worked and waited to get that second flight into space. All righty, pardon me. Getting on into the news here, Joe Biden's coronavirus relief fund is prioritizing money for non-white business owners. Well, you may think this is racist, and you'd be right to say so, but unfortunately in our country right now, discrimination against white people isn't considered racism anymore. It's considered justice or reparations. But restaurants and venues owned by white people will be the last in line for federal relief under his Fraudulencies Restaurants Revitalization Fund, which is prioritizing funds for women and minority groups first. And yeah, it is discriminatory. There's no two ways about that. Over in the House of Representatives, time may be running out for Liz Cheney, and House Minority Whip Steve Scalise is openly supporting Representative Elise Stefanik to replace Liz Cheney as the House Republican Conference Chair. And a lot of stuff has come on out. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy was caught on a hot mic yesterday saying he's lost confidence in Cheney and he's had it with her behavior. So she may be getting her ticket pulled in the very, very near future. She'll still be in the House of Representatives. She's just not going to be in a leadership position. Out in California, Caitlyn Jenner has released her first ad in seeking to recall California Governor Gavin Newsom. She's basically setting her campaign to fight against elitist politicians, but she may have actually alienated part of her base with her recent comments about how transgenders should not be allowed to play in women's sports because it's simply not fair, and that has triggered a bit of a backlash she's going to have to overcome. Although Gavin Newsom is so unpopular, at this point pretty much anybody could beat him, even Claire. Getting on down to Maricopa, we are getting more and more reports of Democratic infiltrators getting into the Maricopa audit. They're talking about this one election operative, Ryan Macias, and he was put into the Maricopa audit by the Democratic Secretary of State. He's a member of the clandestine National Task Force on Election Crisis, which isn't about election integrity, but about restoring restoring confidence and trust in the 2020 election. And people are very concerned because he's very familiar with the technology of the voting machines. He's got a skill set, and people are saying he should be watched very closely. At one point, Ryan Macias misrepresented himself as media to get on the audit floor, and he got caught. So already we're seeing all kinds of dirty tricks there, trying to find some way to derail or discredit the Maricopa audit. Meanwhile, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office sent out a warning to staff to watch out for Black Lives Matter protests in downtown Phoenix this week. So they may be sending in Black Lives Matter to try and disrupt the audit. Katie Hobbs, who's connected to George Soros, supports Black Lives Matter. And according to this article coming out of Kudz Blue, they're asking if she's the one who invited them to Phoenix to try and stop the Maricopa County audit. Up in Windham, New Hampshire, that thing is going really, really ugly because the second investigator selected for the audit up there is this computer program, Harry Hursty, who happens to be an advisory board member to Unscrupulous Verified Voting. Now, there's a little bit of hope there because one of the Windham selectmen says that he will change his vote on who to have do the audit if the majority of the town wants a different audit team. So a call has gone out for the citizens of Windham to let the selectmen know they do not approve of these obviously liberal Democrat hacks to be put in charge of the audit up there. Over in Kansas, their legislature voted to override Democratic Governor Laura Kelly's veto of a couple of election reform bills Monday. Now, inspired by the theft of the 2020 election, the bills aim to prevent similar problems from taking place in the future. Kelly vetoed the bills last month, claiming the legislation was designed to disenfranchise Kansans. And Republican State Senator Carol Tyson rejected the governor's characterization of the bills and said the new legislation would secure voter rights and voter accuracy and voter security. Over in Minnesota, their Senate has passed a voter ID requirement to try and limit voter fraud. So this is definitely being addressed at the state level, even as the federal government turns a blind eye and the United States Supreme Court sits on its hands, refusing to look at any of the evidence. Okay, now, pardon me. Derek Chauvin's attorney, Eric Nelson, has filed a motion for a new trial alleging jury misconduct following this Black Lives Matter activist who was caught lying to the court to get on the jury. And also said the publicity was so pervasive and prejudicial, he had called for a change of venue, which the judge had refused, and so they're going to appeal that. Meanwhile, Floyd attorney Ben Crump is very unhappy at the idea of a new trial, and he's out there screaming, no, 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 cannot be allowed to happen. We got the guilty verdict we worked for, and it should stand. Meanwhile, the Democratic Attorney General Keith Ellison wants to push for an even harsher sentence for Chauvin for what he calls particular cruelty. And so this is still a controversy out there. Meanwhile, the Biden administration has dropped dozens of charges against the violent protesters in Portland. And there was this recent plea agreement with a Black Lives Matter protester who had tried to cut the brake lines on a police vehicle, and it indicates a significant shift from the Trump administration in prosecuting violent protesters. New figures out of Portland indicate that the shift is occurring. The Justice Department is dropping 58 of the 97 criminal charges brought after the Portland riots, including assaults on officers. So right now, only one of the protesters is actually looking at jail time. So they got a get out of jail free card for a lot of them there. Over at Facebook, a document got leaked, and it reveals the words that will get you banned, and users are complaining they've been suspended for as little as calling a friend crazy and sharing a story from the Smithsonian. That's really, really strict out there. Now, Facebook has deleted my accounts, and that's okay because I don't use Facebook anymore. But it does indicate just how draconian and tyrannical social media has become. Speaking of Facebook, their so-called independent oversight board ruled today to uphold the company's January decision to suspend the Facebook and Instagram accounts of Donald Trump. The board did say the indefinite time frame was not appropriate, and they're asking for a review within 6 months over whether or not Trump should be reinstated. Trump has now started his own website, DonaldJTrump.com, where he's posting news and announcement, and of course he's got his own page over on Gab as well. Trump has come on out in response to Facebook's statement from the Oversight Board talking about the corrupt social media companies, saying they must pay a political price. They're already paying an economic one. People are abandoning Twitter and Google and Facebook and even YouTube and moving to the alternate providers to get away from this censorship, and that is definitely cutting into their ad revenues. I wouldn't put it past these companies to try and rig the viewership numbers to keep the ad revenues coming on in. But more and more, we're seeing people just don't use those traditional social media companies anymore. And let's see, tech companies once again blocked a live streamed event featuring anti-apartheid activists, including Palestinian resistance icon Leila Khaled and South Africa's former ANC military leader, Ronnie Kasrils. The University of California at Merced event, whose narratives, What Free Speech for Palestine, was organized to discuss ongoing attacks on critics of Israel in academia and the dangers of censorship, so of course it had to be censored. Meanwhile, the internet fact checkers somehow missed the stealth edits to Stacey Abrams' op-ed. Now, the reality of the internet is that articles that are posted can be revised after publication pretty much without a trace. Now, normally these edits will be labeled with an update, but that's not mandatory. And last month, fact checkers relied on an op-ed in USA Today written by Georgia Democrat Stacey Abrams to evaluate critics' claims about Abrams' position on recent Georgia boycotts. But they didn't know the piece had been stealth-edited after a new development in the story. So they're not checking too closely. Interesting story out of Blacklisted News, talking about Silicon Valley algorithm manipulation keeping corporate media alive. And they sort of look in the Wayback Machine, and they talk about the emergence of the internet was met with hope and enthusiasm by people who understood that the plutocrat-controlled corporate media were manipulating public opinion to manufacture consent for the status quo, whether it was for wars, favored candidates, vaccines, and the democratization of information sharing was hopefully going to give rise to a public consciousness emancipated from the domination of this plutocratic narrative control. Unfortunately, it has not happened. Internet use has become commonplace around the world, and humanity is able to network and share. but it's still firmly under the thumb of the same power structures we've been ruled by for generations, both politically and psychologically. Even the dominant media institutions are somehow still the same, and they are still lying to us, only now we do see it. It is a little bit more obvious. Story coming out of the Federalist. As part of an investigation into former President Donald Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, the Biden Justice Department is seizing communication between the former mayor and a journalist who's investigating President Joe Biden's business dealings with Ukraine. Now, what that has to do with Giuliani, I don't know. But the warrant presented, according to Giuliani's lawyer, Robert Costello, raises questions surrounding the scope and motivation behind the investigation. So, again, they're protecting the status quo. They're protecting his fraudulency. All right, let's talk a little bit about COVID-19. And the United States is being accused of hoarding surplus vaccine doses while our ally India and other states are dealing with a huge resurgence of COVID-19. And according to this article from Press TV, the United States could have as many as 300 million surplus COVID-19 vaccine doses by the end of July, even as India and other countries struggle to curb the spread of the virus. And of course, demand for the vaccine is dropping currently here in the United States. And so maybe the time has come to share with some of these other countries. Over in Thailand and Laos, they're reporting surging COVID cases. India's outbreak has crossed national borders and is moving across Asia. So that's a serious problem there. Now, Seychelles is the world's most vaccinated nation. They vaccinated more of its population against COVID-19 than any other country, but they're having a resurgence of COVID-19, which has forced them to close schools and cancel sporting events for at least the next 2 weeks to try and get the infections under control, which calls into question whether the vaccines are actually working or not. Or maybe they're actually causing the problem. There's another story. This is from Highwire, and their researchers have discovered 2 compelling new data points that support the claim that the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System over at the CDC is catching as little as 1% of actual vaccine injuries or less. So the actual number of vaccine injuries is a lot higher than is being officially reported. Imagine my shock on that one. Now, we posted this little story from Global Research, and it's kind of a look back and a reason why we should be very cautious about these new medications. Back in 1956, German pharmaceutical company Chemie Grünenthal GmbH licensed a new experimental drug designed to treat colds, flu, nausea, and morning sickness. It was known in the United Kingdom as Destival. Distillers Biochemicals Limited declared the drug could be given with complete safety to pregnant women and nursing mothers without adverse effect on mother or child, a basic prerequisite for licensing any drug. 49 countries licensed the drug under multiple different names. Luckily for America, the then head of the FDA, Dr. Frances Kelsey, refused authorization for use in the U.S. market due to her concerns about the lack of evidence on the drug's safety. The drug was also known as thalidomide. And if you don't know what I'm talking about there, go ahead and use a web search engine to look it up. It was a major, major disaster. All right, Facebook has just permanently banned LifeSite News' Facebook page. This is not a temporary measure. It is gone for good. And in a quick series of notices and emails to LifeSite News marketing department, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll come back to this story after these few words. And welcome back to our show here. And before we get back to the news here, first of all, a friendly reminder that Republic Broadcasting does need your continuing support to keep doing what we're doing. And as you can tell from the stories we're reporting on, we are literally in an information war with the, here on the internet. And the bad guys have got all the money, and so we need all the little money to gang together to sort of equalize things a little bit. So once again, the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. Now remember, if you send in a donation for $100 or more, you get your choice of an RBN coffee mug or an RBN t-shirt. So include a return address, and if you want the t-shirt, we need your t-shirt size. And I understand we're running out of those, so you may want to move on that really quick. If you send in a donation of $115 or more, you will get both the mug and the t-shirt. And don't forget, the Front Sight Firearms deal is still on, and that's a real sweet deal. Now, Mike in our control room wanted me to let you know regarding our phone lines, they now have a recorded greeting on the phone line. So if you call in and the lines are full, you will hear a message basically saying that yes, the lines are full and please call back later. And that's going to, I think, clear up a lot of the confusion, because people call on in, they think the lines are broken or something, like, Layla was saying, her primary line yesterday couldn't get through. And so hopefully this is going to make it a little easier and less confusing for people to get through. All right, getting on back to the news here, we were talking about how Facebook has permanently banned LifeSite News' Facebook page. And Facebook banned them, accusing LifeSite of publishing false information about COVID-19 that could contribute to physical harm, as opposed to the vaccines, which we know contribute to physical harm. Facebook also said they will deplatform Facebook pages that publish vaccine discouraging information. So the dictatorship is out there. Now, LifeSite News, to their credit, has responded to the banning by Facebook by launching their own video channel on Brighteon, featuring outstanding interviews with America's top health freedom advocates. And if you go to lifesitenews.com, there's now a mailing list sign up where you will be notified of new videos being posted to their channel at Brighteon. So we have to strike a blow against censorship, strike a blow for liberty, and keep the information flowing to the American people, in the face of entrenched interests that want us to go back to a permanent state of being lied to and believing what we're told, and just smiling and being happy little mushrooms. Over in France, Marine Le Pen has been acquitted of charges she broke hate speech laws by tweeting pictures of Islamic State atrocities. Now, she shared the images back in December of 2015, a few weeks after Islamic State jihadists killed 130 people in attacks in Paris, in response to a journalist who she accused of drawing a comparison between Islamic State and her political party. And so she tweeted out the pictures to say, no, there's a difference in behavior. She was charged under hate speech laws. She has now been acquitted. And Macron is now very, very nervous about the upcoming elections, because the polls are definitely very tight right now. Okay, Saudi Arabia, according to multiple international reports, is trying to mend their relations with Syria's Assad. This is a major first since the war began back in 2011. And The two broke off relations back then as it became clear the Saudis were a key part of the Western allied push for regime change. Now, what this may signal is, given that Syria has survived all of this U.S. action since 2011, Saudi Arabia may be thinking that the United States isn't quite the monster it once was, and it's now okay to go off and make friends with Syria and tell the United States that we're no longer interested in doing what you tell us to do. Meanwhile, the Royal Air Force is set to deploy its 617 Squadron, known as the Dam Busters, allegedly against Daesh targets in Iraq and Syria. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be back with more news after these few words. Welcome back to our show here, and it looks like Egypt and Libya are moving closer together. A delegation from Egypt's Civil Aviation Authority is about to inspect several Libyan airports in preparation for the resumption of direct flights between the two countries, and they are looking at operating 35 flights per week from Mitiga, Misrata, and Benina International Airports to Cairo International Airport. General Director of African Airlines Khalil Al-Majama said that the delegation from Libya's Ministry of Communication visited Egypt recently and held several meetings with officials of the Egyptian Civil Aviation Authority. Over in Iran, Rouhani is censuring Israel as an enemy not only of Palestine but of the entire region. And they're getting ready to mark the International Quds Day, and Iran's president has denounced Israel as the enemy of nations in the region, but said that the Zionist regime's occupation of Palestine will not last forever. Now, International Quds Day falls on May 7th this year. That's this coming Friday. And said it would be a mourning day for the Zionists this year. Okay. Little bit of good news. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu missed his deadline of midnight last night to build a new government, and this opens the door for his rivals to take power. And it's raising the possibility that the Likud party could be pushed into the opposition position for the first time in 12 years. Oh, pardon me. And after Netanyahu has failed, Lapid, President Reuven Rivlin, is consulting with party leaders to decide which candidate to task with forming a new government after Netanyahu's mandate expired yesterday. Now, of course, if Netanyahu loses his job as prime minister, he is facing major corruption trials for that German submarine deal, and he could be looking at some serious jail time. The president of the Ukraine met with the presidents of NATO members Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland in Warsaw back on the 3rd, Monday, to solidify cooperation against their common adversaries, Russia and Belarus. The five heads of state signed a joint declaration pledging multifaceted cooperation, including on security concerns. There's an upcoming NATO summit next month where Ukraine's membership in NATO will be on the agenda. Getting on back to Iran here, story out of Global Research, talking about the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action nuclear talks maybe being an exercise in futility. And sources coming out from Vienna are saying that they have yet to come to an understanding on the most critical points. And one of those critical points is Iran's demand that the United States terminate all of the sanctions they have placed on Iran. Now, when the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was first agreed to, the United States agreed they would relax sanctions on Iran. That never happened. In fact, the Congress immediately added new sanctions to Iran, and Iran is understandably eager for the United States to basically honor its commitments under the original deal before they start talking about a new deal. And there's an article in Press TV saying that the United States' continued refusal to end the sanctions is probably going to derail the Vienna talks, and there are, of course, a lot of vested interests, including Israel, who do not want the talks to succeed. Okay, now, pardon me. NATO is preparing Azerbaijan's army for its next war. This is coming out of Trend News Agency, which cited Azerbaijani Member of Parliament Vugor Iskenderov celebrating military cooperation and integration between Azerbaijan and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The basis for current high-level cooperation between the Caspian Sea country and the 30-nation global military bloc was laid in 1994 with Baku's joining NATO's Partnership for Peace program. That program was employed to groom the 14 countries that have joined the alliance since 1999: Albania, Bulgaria, Croatia, the Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, North Macedonia, Montenegro, Poland, Romania, Slovakia, and Slovenia, which, if I recall correctly, very few of them actually border on the North Atlantic. So, anyway, according to the Azeri deputy, his nation is conducting a political dialogue with NATO on a wide range of mutual interests. Over in the Western Pacific, Chinese flights through Taiwan's air defense identification zone have doubled as the United States steps up its military activity in the region. And the Chinese flights through Taiwan's air defense zone doubled in April compared to the previous 2 months, which coincides with the increased U.S. military activity in the region. While there is a lot of hype surrounding those flights, the air defense identification zone is not considered Taiwanese airspace, and the Chinese planes usually pass through the southwest corner of the air defense identification zone, far from the island of Taiwan, but it is symbolic. An air defense identification zone is an airspace where a country requires for an aircraft to identify themselves. The air defense identification zone concept is not covered under international treaties and has no international regulations. Alrighty, the United States is sending the USS America amphibious ship and dozens of F-35s to help Manila face China in the South China Sea. So they're spending more money and sending more weapons there. Meanwhile, Australia is escalating the hybrid war on the Belt and Road Initiative at America's behest. And Canberra has canceled Victoria's 2 Belt and Road Initiative agreements, and that is consistent with this unstated but increasingly obvious strategy. The United States is vowing to work with partners to keep pressure on Venezuela's President Maduro. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken vowed yesterday that Washington would work with partners to maintain pressure on the government of President Maduro for a peaceful return to democracy. And Blinken's stern words came just a day after a senior White House official made clear that the administration is in no rush to ease sanctions on Maduro's socialist government or make major gestures toward communist-ruled Havana. So isn't that weird? I mean, they're bringing socialism and communism to this country, but they're still out there wagging the finger at other socialist communist countries. Seems kind of weird to me. Talking about the economic news now, the United States debt to gross domestic product ratio is now worse than Greece's before the 2008 crash. And Warren Buffett has issued a grave inflation warning. Costs are just up, up, up. We're already seeing it in food and fuel, which is where inflation first shows up. And gas prices are up something like 25% now, just in the last month. Another story, this one coming out of Russia today, saying, "Tell the truth, America, the G7 meeting is all about trying to contain the rise of China." Because China is this manufacturing and economic superpower. The United States used to be a manufacturing and economic superpower, and today our manufacturing has been in decline for about 30 years, and they're just printing money out of thin air to keep the system going. Now, the supposed theme of the G7 summit in London is establishing a rules-based international order, according to Antony Blinken. And what that means is the U.S. is trying to persuade other countries to get tough on China. And high on the agenda are China, Russia, the situation in Myanmar, and basically interfering in those areas as well. Now, last week there was a story, or earlier in this week rather, that the European Union was pressuring other countries to kick Russia out of the SWIFT international payment system, which is dominated by the United States. Russia has apparently shrugged their shoulders at that and said, yeah, we're okay with leaving that. They're going to join alternative systems, including Iran's electronic financial messaging platform, SEPAM. The decision announced by Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova comes in the wake of a resolution passed by the European Parliament calling for Russia's expulsion from SWIFT. So all that they're doing is, again, they're driving countries away from the U.S. sphere of influence and into other areas, as it will. Now, we talked about this before, Biden's massive spending here and there, his jobs plan, his environment plan, the Green New Deal, the infrastructure plan, and anybody with a calculator can see this is just not supportable. And we're getting confirmation from an article in Blabberbuzz talking about economist Stephen Moore, saying that the United States does not need a blizzard of additional spending, and he believes there will be a backlash if President Joe Biden's American Jobs Plan passes. He says America cannot handle the Biden spending spree, and there doesn't seem to be any logic to the plans. It's just anything that sounds good is being promoted out there. And, Biden's address to a joint session of Congress was pretty boring. He did lay out a very aggressive left-wing tax and spend agenda, massive spending for everything from babysitting services to free health care. Everything is going to be free. Of course, everyone knows that everything cannot be free. Somebody somewhere is going to be forced to pay for it. And Moore said we used to talk about the V-shaped recovery, so that's what we're seeing right now. And he says we don't need a blizzard of additional spending, just let the economy heal on its own. Now, this next story, this is very, very alarming. This is coming out of Citizen Free Press. There is a federal judge, Dabney Friedrich, who today struck down the national eviction moratorium, leaving millions of Americans at risk of losing their homes. Now, the CDC had banned most evictions across the country since last September. And Joe Biden had extended that protection for renters until July. Right now, 20% of renters across the U.S. are behind on their payments. So this decision from U.S. District Judge Friedrich of the District of Columbia is a victory for property owners who have themselves been driven to the edge of bankruptcy by the CDC's moratorium. And frankly, I never understood how the CDC had the legal authority to declare a moratorium on rents and evictions. Now, it's not yet clear how widespread the impact of the decision will be. And according to Diane Yentl, President and CEO of the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, she's hoping it won't be widespread, but I think it's the beginning of a trend. And here is really the problem. Okay, these poor renters and also people behind on their mortgages, they still owe all that money. And what they need are high-paying jobs to pay off those debts. They don't need handouts. They don't need universal basic income. They need jobs. Trump was absolutely right. We've got to bring manufacturing back to this country because you cannot have a healthy economy without something to sell to other countries. And we really don't, except for our weapons, and other countries are starting to turn away from those weapons because of the high cost and poor performance of things like the F-22 and the F-35 and the Gerald Ford and the Zumwalt destroyer and on and on and on and on. Now, Joe Biden has corrected his comment about anybody earning under $400,000 a year won't pay any taxes, and he clarified it to say that he will not raise taxes on anyone earning under $400,000. Now, that's certainly a little bit more realistic than what was said before. Speaking of taxes, back in 1985, President Reagan called for a simple tax filing system under which most people would not have to fill out a tax return. Instead, they just receive a form from the IRS showing their refund or tax liability. In 2010, a White House advisory board proposed pretty much the same thing. In 2019, Senator Elizabeth Warren also proposed an easy filing system that would allow the bulk of taxpayers to avoid the unpleasantness of filling out returns that are dozens of pages long with complicated sheets of instructions, and she's promoting that bill again this year. Well, why are we still stuck with all of those long forms and everything? It's because of the tax preparation industry. They're making billions and billions of dollars filling out tax forms for you, the American taxpayers, and they keep lobbying to keep the tax laws complicated in order that most Americans just can't figure it out. And so they're forced to pay more money to the tax preparation industry. And even Einstein said the most difficult thing to understand in the universe is the income tax. Okay. Attention is being focused on the COMEX gold delivery again. They're pointing out the fact that delivery on COMEX is a charade designed to impart legitimacy to the price discovered there through the trading of digital derivatives. And they're simply trading warehouse receipts back and forth to maintain the illusion of physical delivery. We'll be right back after these few words. Back to our show here. Now, the world's largest jewelry brand, Pandora, has announced they will no longer sell mined diamonds. They are going to be working exclusively with lab-made diamonds, which are, they claim, physically identical to the natural occurring ones. The difference is that these diamonds are going to sell for a third of the price of the mined diamonds, and I can just imagine the screaming coming from the De Beers family right now. But they are hoping that the lower prices are going to attract more customers into the diamond jewelry. Okay, story coming on out of Zero Hedge. We're seeing more and more this push for digital currencies for the central banks And Dominic Frisby, with Money, Markets, and Other Matters, is sounding the warning over the fact that digital money is programmable, meaning that the central bank issuers, such as the Federal Reserve or the Bank of England, can build specific rules into it, meaning you can use that money for certain things, but not for other things. And Dominic said that cash grants users freedom and power, and it absolutely does. And that's what this push to digital currencies is trying to take away from us. Boeing announced on Friday that it has fired 65 employees over the last year for engaging in or being part of racist, discriminatory, or hateful conduct. In a company-wide report that unveiled the first demographic breakdown of its workforce, the plane maker stated the employees were terminated between June 2020 and April 21st, 2021. American companies have come under pressure from investors to publicly disclose information about diversity among employees in the wake of movements such as Black Lives Matter. Now, call me silly, but if I'm riding on a Boeing aircraft, I want to know that it was built by the absolute best people possible, not by a checklist of various assorted minority groups, genders, and orientations to satisfy the woke crowd. Back at the White House, Jem Psaki is blaming Donald Trump for the border crisis and claiming Biden is cleaning up the mess that Trump left. Everybody is finally admitting there's a crisis at the border, and they're trying to dump it on Donald Trump. But we know Trump was trying to close that border down. Biden just opened it wide up, and the flood is underway, and it is a crisis. There is absolutely a crisis. Now, the only person not blaming Donald Trump for the migrant crisis is Kamala Harris. She is blaming human-caused global warming, saying that climate change is what is driving migrants from their home countries to the United States. And it's a little bit out there, I think, but that's what she's saying. Okay, we got to take a break here for station identification. We're going to go ahead and open up the phone lines, area code 512-248-8252, and we'll be right back. And welcome back to our show. Hour number 2, the phone lines are open, area code 512-248-8252. Story coming on out of, let's see, Sons of Liberty Media. Tom in Florida is probably going to like this one. They're talking about how there is a lot of criminal behavior from the illegals that are coming into the United States. And they start out basically talking about how Joe Biden wants American people to stop calling them illegal aliens, but instead the politically correct approved term of undocumented non-citizen. Now, if you were to sneak into Mexico, you would not be called that. You would be called a criminal, and rightly so. And that's what they should be called here. Just by stepping over that border without official permission, they are criminals, and they should be treated as such. And then the article goes on about how this illegal alien got 5 years in prison for killing a 24-year-old man in a drunk driving car crash in the sanctuary state of New Jersey. Another story, this one coming out of Russia Insider, and it's basically saying that Russia is watching while Europe is destroying itself with all of this refugees and migrants and immigrants. They're destroying their own national character, their own culture, and I guess Russia is kind of amused about this. And they're saying it's an out-of-control situation. They're expecting people to organize protest. But instead, they're seeing, you know, these meek, effeminate Europeans dressed up in unisex outfits, chalking no to terrorism on sidewalks. And do they really think these people are going to be able to go up against the Russian army if worse comes to worse? Over in California, they're proposing a curriculum framework that rejects ideas of natural gifts and talents in math. This is an extension of a story we covered a week ago, where the accelerated math classes are all being shut down in the name of equity. Okay, nobody gets to excel. You're all going to be equally stupid and uneducated, and that's going to be perfectly woke. Same thing is happening over there in Virginia, where there is this multimillionaire businessman who is running for the governorship, and he is accusing the state of derailing children's education in an effort to become more woke, and he's definitely opposed to critical race theory as well. And Americans are continuing to panic hoard guns for the 16th straight month in April, according to the FBI's National Instant Criminal Background Check System. The data provides insight into the trends behind Americans purchasing firearms. The NICS logged 3.514 million background checks in April of this year, which is more than any other April on record. And so the more the gun grabbers talk about banning guns, the more Americans are arming themselves, and well, they should. One more story before we start taking phone calls here. The American Medical Association, specifically James Madara, the CEO, issued an open letter to the National Governors Association calling all legislative efforts to stop the transgender mutilation of children a dangerous government intrusion into the practice of medicine. So he's basically saying anyone who opposes transgender mutilation of children is dangerous. Well, you know, this transgender mutilation, you know, it's profitable. There's big money in this surgery and these hormone treatments. Okay, let's go to the phones here, and I'm going to start. Oh, Layla in Canada. Hello, Layla. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I managed to get through this time on my main number.
Good.
I wanted to talk about immigration. One thing that one of my distant cousins that I've never met face-to-face with has told me by phone is that they consider themselves Arabs, and they consider themselves superior to the indigenous people of South and Central America.
Okay.
All of those who identify as Arabs. And that has translated into, or has been obvious in the fact that almost all of those that I know are supremely wealthy. Many of them have even run for the presidency or the premiership of certain countries, especially those from Palestine, because they all left during the Ottoman period.
Yes.
When it was so brutal. They are, if they manage to come as migrants with no money and to become so wealthy that when my parents visited them, they were astonished at how they had palaces literally on hilltops, as well as coastal summer houses. Well, they might call them summer houses, but they too were almost palatial on the Pacific coast, where they would go for fresh seafood. So if they were able to get so wealthy so easily, then that does say something about the lack of entrepreneurial spirit among the indigenous peoples, and they are the ones who are flooding here.
Yes.
They are brought here intentionally to mingle and interbreed with the intelligent Caucasoid peoples. Call them white races, whatever you want to call them, intentionally in order to make us more easy to control. This is why I was so strongly opposed to interbreeding.
Yes.
Not merely with black migrants or African migrants, because many of them are not. I mean, I had experiences when I was a teenager. I would go regularly to the Caribbean islands. Mm-hmm. On trips, and I once remember this is before they were all developed with these American-style resorts. There was a nightclub which was simply lights strung up on posts, and I looked around, and there were hundreds of people around. I was the only white person there, and nobody, not one single person, harassed me. No male approached me. They were extremely respectful prior to the recent indoctrination trying to stir them up to hate whites. Anyway, that was, of course, when I was around 20, so that would be about 55 years ago.
Okay.
Things have changed dramatically since then. But the reason we have to be really careful about getting them out, don't wait for the government to do it. Don't sit back and think that Biden or whoever the next president will be, or anybody, any of the national services that are responsible for protecting Americans, that they will do their job and get rid of these migrants that are going to be a tremendous liability to the future. I don't know how. I hate to sound like I'm inciting physical activity to eject them, but that has got to be done. It has got to be done. I was heartened, very encouraged by the comments from the guy Kelly from Austin, I believe, who
Yes.
said that the ranchers in Texas are starting to take action.
Yes.
We mustn't rely on them. Everybody. When you know that there is someone that is an illegal migrant, I don't know what is the way to do it. I mean, the age of the people that would have taken action is now, they're so much older, and which is why they've waited this long to do it, for that particular generation to either end up in nursing homes or to be senior citizens and
Yes.
not as aggressive as they might previously have been in defending their country. But it's going to fall on them because the younger generation has been diluted intellectually
Been
and
brainwashed.
Intellectually. Yeah, they're brainwashed, and they're also timid, and they're compliant, and that has come through a number of sources: food, water, air, indoctrination in schools. A number of factors have influenced them, including the reliance on their so-called smartphones that dominate their every impulse. It's going to take that older generation, and actually, our generation has less to lose. So I don't know. I've been encouraged by those who are close to me not to say things like this on the phone or on the internet, but it has got to come down to physical action. If I were capable, if I could get over the border, and if I were capable, I would personally take physical activity to eject them. Even those who were supposedly related to me, because they were so much in favor of the migrants coming here.
Yeah.
I'm outraged. So I don't know what else I should dare say, except we have got to continue to financially support RBN.
Yes.
And particularly your show, Mike.
Well, thank you.
Other shows on RBN are very good. They're excellent. But there is none that meets your level of information. I tip my hat to you, because I can imagine the hours that you spend scouring the internet to find news and to find other news to balance it out. And Claire is the one who probably loses the most because she doesn't have your time.
Claire puts up with an awful lot because of the radio show and the website.
Yes, she must. It's a tremendous sacrifice on her part and on your part. But I sense your commitment to the future, despite the fact that you may not, be able to enjoy the benefits of your sacrifice. But anyway, please, everybody, contribute to RBN. Now, in Canada, for those of you who are listening, the Canadian dollar the U.S. dollar is weakening, so the Canadian currency is slowly, it goes up and down so much,
Yes.
It's hard to say. But we really should be also contributing. We should not use the exchange rate and the fees that are piled on top of that and the cost of transporting the funds. We should not use that as an excuse. Our liberty in Canada depends on what happens in the U.S. It always has. And I think we've now reached a point where most of us no longer deny it. Please support RBN, and particularly support Mike's show.
Well, thank you very much for those
Mike.
kind words.
they're minimal and certainly well deserved. So be well, and I'll continue to watch and listen and call in every now and then. Thank you for your efforts. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you for the phone call. We look forward to the next time you call in, and we're going to switch to Kelly in Austin. Hello, Kelly. Your ears must be burning. What's on your mind today?
Well, you mentioned Jen Psaki blaming the border crisis on Trump. Look, I know many ranchers down there, many ranchers, and I know many people that live in the small towns as well, along with the officials. Not one person down there would tell you that this is Trump's problem, that he created it. And they'll tell you it all started on November 3rd when Biden, quote, won this fraudulent election. And it became much worse after the 20th. I've talked to them about this. And no one down there blames Trump. This is just the Biden administration gaslighting everybody to cover up their incompetence. That's exactly what that is.
Well, they're covering up their agenda. I mean, this is what they want to have happen. It's not a question of incompetence. I mean, the Democrats have been throwing open the borders for a long time now, figuring that the illegal immigrants, if they're given enough free stuff paid for by the legal American citizens, they'll always vote Democratic. It's bread and circuses is what it is.
Yeah, they want it. They do want it to happen, but the point simply is that they're so incompetent as politicians and that they don't understand the implications of the nonsense that they're promoting. And then, and really, they have to understand that the flood of people across the border down there is actually a disaster. And of course, I think they're going to do whatever they can to try to cover it up. And they're going to tap dance and gaslight, lie, do whatever they have to do to sound like they're innocent. It's all Trump's doing, which is utter nonsense, absolute utter nonsense. Yeah, this other BS about doing away with AP math and physics and what else, that in the long run is really going to hurt.
Yes,
the United States, and I think what you're going to see is an exodus of people from public schools into private schools where these are still taught. We sent our daughter to a private school, an all-girls private school, the oldest west of the Mississippi, and it was a rigorous education. She got a lot more out of there than she would have even out of the best public schools where we lived in Louisiana. But I think you're going to see private schools exploding as this nonsense undermines the curriculum.
Yes.
And the public schools become obsessed with equity rather than excellence, period.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And I think as more and more parents need to take a closer look at what their kids are being taught. We have schools that are openly trying to conceal what they're doing from the parents. And that's a red warning sign. I mean, in my view, parents should have control over what their children are being taught in the schools that the parents' taxes are paying for.
Yes. My daughter, who has a doctorate in engineering, is not going to send her son to a public school. She's been quite liberal most of her life, and I think that she's seen what's happening now, and she and her husband are talking about homeschooling because they don't want their son to be indoctrinated with this critical race theory nonsense. She had a solid prep school type education, and I think that's what she wants for her son. But she's looking around at what she sees at the public schools now, and it's very discouraging. Her husband teaches math at a middle school here in Austin, Texas. He tells me that there are 14 different languages spoken in that class.
That's a lot.
He cannot communicate with some of the people in there. He said at least 2 of the students in this class last year spoke Swahili, but they didn't speak English. Well, I spent a lot of time in East Africa, and I told him, Connor, they speak English. If they speak Swahili, they speak English. They're just BSing you. But I mean, there's Vietnamese, there's Spanish, there's Hindi, there's God knows what else. And in many cases, they just can't communicate with these kids because the language barriers are such that it makes it impossible to offer sound, basic instruction in mathematics. And he's frustrated, very frustrated. So I I expect to see him bail out of that. But this is happening all over the place. And the Austin public school system, you cannot do anything. You cannot do anything to separate students into advanced classes now, and to segregate the students who don't speak English, put them into classes where they can get proficient in English, because that's discriminatory. Now, what that's doing is that's actually very unfair to proficient English speakers and students who do have the aptitude to advanced math courses.
You know, we've been hearing all this nonsense about, how math is racist or white supremacist. Good spelling and grammar is part of white supremacy, and they're just making excuses for the dumbing down of the next generation. Yeah. Well, and it's only going to get worse. Charlotte Iserby wrote a book years ago called The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. And what she wrote back then, I just presaged everything you're seeing happen right now. And it's so bad that I think that the public education system in many states, or just across the country, is in danger of imploding. Yeah. And there will be no incentive for people who want good educations for their children to send their children to public schools if they're going to be if the public school system is going to be more concerned about critical race theory and equity. Not to mention drag queen story hour. Yeah, well, that too. All right, Mike, that's my rant for the day. Thanks for taking my call. All right, well, thank you very much here. And we're going to go to Sebastian in Sweden. But, Sebastian, we're almost on the edge of a commercial break here, so I'm probably going to have to cut you off real soon. In fact, we're just about there. But stay on the line. I'm going to come right back to you just as soon as we finish these words from our sponsors. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go to Sebastian in Sweden. Hello, Sebastian. Thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi Mike. How you doing? I'm doing all right. I just had an accident a month ago. I fell down and hurt myself, but not too bad. I'm all right now. I was thinking of the tax. You mentioned the tax system, and we've been using that system that Reagan, and tried to enforce back in his administration. That you just sign your name and you send it in. And I think the majority of the Swedes, those who don't own companies, do that. And it's quite easy. And you just look it over to see if anything's wrong. I paid so much % to this bank and that bank and whatever. And if you have, I don't have any stocks, but if you have stocks, you would, look at that. And then we just sign your name and send it in, or it's usually done digitally because we have a pretty good system here with signing your name over the. I'm sure you didn't like it, but it's a system that you can. It's a code you get. You sign your name over the internet, and it's really secure. I don't think there's any other country that has it. I've never heard about it being hacked yet, and I don't think it. I think it's a pretty secure system. Actually, they could have that system as a voting system in America. I don't like anything to do with computers voting. I hope they never have it here because we have paper ballots. And let me see. About the foreigners, we have 675,000 that's unemployed foreigners in this country, and they can't get a job because they won't learn the language. They stay in their areas of, the housing, and they don't try to integrate with the Swedish culture, and the government's trying to do away with the Swedish culture altogether. They were thinking about not allowing, to have so many flag days to put up the Swedish flag. And they said, it's going to be on the 29th of April. That's when the King's birthday, right? Yes. And I never fly the flag on the King's birthday, but I did this year just because the government was trying to take it away. And, it's just really getting bad with the foreigners. And I agree with Tom from Florida about him calling up about foreigners, and Lila were talking as well today. And it is a bad thing. If if they accept the culture, okay, that's good. I came to Sweden in 1970. I went to school, the Swedish school, language school, with a lot of foreigners, 2 Palestinians, a Christian and a Muslim, and Jordanian, South Americans, a few people from Poland, and everyone, was really, tried to learn the language as much as possible. Later, the Muslim Palestinian had his own business, and it was successful business. And they really wanted to integrate into the Swedish system. Of course, he really wasn't he was Muslim as much as I was supposed to be Catholic, because we used to go to drink together a few beers, right? So he really wasn't that, but he was a good guy. I mean, because everyone knew the language, they had to learn. But now you don't have to do that. And after 4 years now, it used to be 7. After 4 years, if you're a politically asylum, after 4 years you can become a Swedish citizenship. So they changed it. It used to be 7. I'm not sure if maybe it was 5 for political asylum. I'm not sure. But I mean, it's the Social Democrats and the Green Party and the other parties like the Center Party, they want these people here. They want them to become citizens because they want their vote, just like the Democrats in America that want the Mexican vote. That's all it is to it. And then a few weeks ago, I heard your program, and you were talking about Echelon. Yes. The spy. And I remember in the early days of the Internet, maybe you remember this too, there was a day, I think it was I'm not sure if it was October or something, there was a day that you should try to crash Echelon. And I remember because I had like 5 or 10 emailed different anonymous names, and I would send it to friends in the States, and I would have the subject like a bomb, and then I would put a picture of a girl in a bikini and say, check her out, she's a real sex bomb. Just to try to get the computers down. I remember reading that in Wired. I used to read Wired when it first came out in the I think it came out in the early 90s or something, or maybe late 80s. But I was I subscribed to Wired when I was at work. They let me have that subscription, which was pretty good. But that's all I had on my mind today, Mike. And I know 4 people that have they had their 2 doses of vaccine already. It was sorry?
Yeah,
okay, I'll let you go now.
I'm going to have to let you go. There's the music for the commercial break.
Take care, bye.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We'll be back with more phone calls after these few words. And welcome back to our show here. We have open phone lines right now, area code 512-248-8252, and we're going to go to Tom in Florida. Hello, Tom. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind today?
Oh, yes, Michael. Yeah, good day to you and all your great patriots. But, Mike, I just want to say thank you to Layla, and she was excellent. She made another excellent call today, and the last 2 callers were awesome. And what I want to tell Layla is thank you for comparing me to Paul Revere, because, no, you guys are all patriots. Everybody just called into your show, every one of them. Kelly, all of them. They're all patriots. Layla and, of course, the last caller, they're all patriots. And, Mike, you have a show that it's just too bad it's not going out to hundreds of millions of people. It's really happening.
We're doing our best.
I know that. I know, for sure. And it's going to get only bigger, I believe. But, Mike, going to what I want to say now is because, Layla hit something really heavy, what she was talking about. It was really intense, but she was right on the money. And before I don't really want to go into about, because I've been to the Caribbean, I know what she's talking about. So she's right on the money. But they have that place has changed. Last time I went to the Bahamas, which was 3 years ago, I won't ever go back, Mike. We have, of course, they have hurricanes, but I mean, it's too much. Even I already told you about basically what's happened in Cuba, but I don't want to get into that right now, Mike. What I do want to talk about is, and Kelly was awesome again, and the last caller, they're all awesome. What's happening in Sweden? What's happening in Sweden, Mike? the land of the Vikings. It's been basically just it's being run over. The land of the Viking men and women. What's going on? They have a show on the History Channel called The Vikings. Would they all get brainwashed, or I don't know what's going on with that nonsense. You know, Mike, as far as the immigration situation here in South Florida, Kelly's right. These people are all speaking different languages. Mike, the biggest networks in South Florida are not English; they're Spanish.
Yes,
they have more news networks in Spanish than they do in English. They would never allow that for the Germans, who are the biggest population in this country, the United States. They would never allow Germans to have German 24-hour broadcasting. People who speak only German. That would not be allowed, tolerated. Am I lying, Mike? They wouldn't allow Italian.
Well, the German population in this country has learned to speak English. And that's right. You know, they wanted to learn English, and unfortunately, a lot of these immigrants coming in, like Sebastian said, they don't feel that they need to learn the indigenous language. They're just going to go on speaking Swahili or whatever it is. And at some point, somebody's going to say there are enough Swahili speakers out there to make a Swahili radio station, financially attractive.
Well, exactly. Well, Sebastian was right on about what he said about the flag. They want to get rid of the Swedish flag. They'd probably like to put up a Muslim flag. I mean, that's just the way it is, Mike, when you have herds of immigrants coming over and dominating the area that they're coming into. These people are not coming here, like I've been saying for your show for quite a while, Mike. They're not coming here to compliment me. They're not coming here to compliment the last Patriot colleges called in. They're coming here to take your lunch and eat. They're going to eat your lunch and take your job.
Yes.
That's what I want to say, Mike. And, Marco made a great call the other day when he was talking about the job he's doing, and these people are getting jobs, don't even score well. They just give them to these people, black, white. I mean, I don't care who you are. If you don't grade out, you shouldn't deserve the job. This affirmative black shit and all this, it's just insanity, Mike. It's absolutely insane. I could go on and on for hours about what I've known and learned here in South Florida with the fire department, with the transit agency, solid waste, all these different outlets. Mike, they're bringing in people. Some of these people are not even American citizens getting these high-paying jobs here in South Florida. I told you about that.
Yeah, you did.
And it's impossible. It's unbelievable what's going on. I mean, for a guy like a white-angle guy like me to get promoted, forget it. It ain't going to happen. If you're dark-skinned, you're going to get a promotion. It's the way it is, Mike. This is the reality of what we're facing. It all started with that imbecile Kennedy, the murderer, Teddy Kennedy, in 1965. That the whites in that country at the time should have stood and said, "Hell no, we're not going to pass your nonsense, you criminal." He was a murderer, a Chappaquiddick. He got away. Look at these Kennedys. The family got away with, Mike, because it's insane. John F. Kennedy actually had a little moral scruples about him compared to the rest of them. And he was still a womanizer disgrace. But I mean, the whole thing has turned out to be a big giant cabal. And that's what Zog's been wanting all this time since World War II, Mike. They want to bring down the United States to its knees. And they want Whitey to beg and plead. I mean, that's how I'm looking at this big scenario now, Mike. And it's preposterous. But, we're waking up the masses, Mike. That's all we can do. We got to wake the masses up. Other callers will call in. You got great callers still have to call in. Great patriots. You got Miles. You got Kevin. You got, so many. And, so Marco. You got so many great patriots. And you know what? We're starting to make a difference, Mike, I do believe. I really do. I really feel that. But, Mike, now I'm going to get to what I was just looking at, Mike. I hope you talk about this a little bit on your next call. Mike, did you see this, the homicide rate in Chicago right now since January 1st to right now?
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Okay, I'm going to give you the figures. 203 murdered, 1,088 shot, 1,088 shot. The B&Es, the carjackings, it's insane. That's in one city, Mike. One city alone. And we know who's doing that insanity. Now, you had this jurist in the Chauvin case who actually is having a BLM shirt on.
Yes.
Basically, Chauvin's already guilty. And this guy, Chauvin, got guilty. But, Mike, that trial was not fair. Because,
no, it wasn't.
Look, it was not a fair trial. This guy's basically, they never say, look, if you notice, they dropped the Jesse Smollett case ever since this COVID came out. Because, Mike, right before COVID came out, Smollett case was going to hit the bombshell in the media. Even the mainstream media was going to have to cover it, but they didn't want it. Zog did not want to cover it. They didn't want to call it the Molly Tibbetts case. They didn't want to talk about the illegal alien that came into Iowa stabbed her 15 times right through her body, Mike. I saw the story on Breitbart and Drudge even at that time. That Drudge report has gone totally leftist Marxist. Before, when Trump was running 3 years ago, it had a little bit of truth to it. Now the Drudge Sludge report has gone totally leftist Marxist communist because they are being dictated, just like Donald Trump's booted off of Facebook. Donald Trump's booted off of Twitter. Who do these people think the hell they are, Mike? Who are these criminals? Look at, and Layla made a great statement yesterday about this, Melinda Gates and Bill Gates. They're two demonic spirits. You know, and we hear about Bill Gates went to Africa. Well, his father went to Africa and built all these water desalination plants. What about all the poor white people live in this country, Mike, that live in trailers? There's more poor white people in the United States of America right now than any other ethnic group, Mike. Okay? Listen, we never hear the filthy communist Bolshevik Biden media talk about that, the Biden Bolshevik media. Now, let's talk about this, Mike. Did you see the Drudge report, Breitbart and Newsmax today in the Fox News, Mike? You know what it is? White women aren't even having children, Mike. It's all over on every major network right now. White women in the United States of America, ladies and gentlemen, are not even bearing their own race back. We're doomed, Mike.
Yeah, the birth rate is really plunging. Some are blaming the economic hardships for it. We still don't know if that epicyte gene broke into the wild. That would be a factor as well. But yeah, it's replacement theory isn't really a theory. It's actually happening.
Exactly. And you know what, Mike? If you look at all the commercials, I don't know, I think it was Layla brought it, or somebody brought it up, they're right on the money. Mike, in all these commercials, it's always a blonde-haired woman with a black man. Check it out, Mike.
Yeah, no, I've noticed it. I do watch commercials closely because I used to work in the industry.
I know black women are not happy about this.
No, they aren't.
Are not happy, Mike. They're not. That's what the narrative these Zog is trying to create. But they make these Zog agents. These Jews do not want their women marrying one of them. They'll cut them out of their will and inheritance and everything. But they sure want Anglos, the women, marry them. And you know what? This is all bull, Mike. Every group should be for their own. You know, and it's unfortunate. And if you say, like, when I'm saying, he's a racist. No, I'm not a racist. I'm a realist, Mike. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Called, if you have two dogs from different breed, what do you call them, Mike, when they have a puppy?
A mutt.
There you go. So, that's what they're trying to do to our society here in the United States of America, Mike. The frightening thing is, Mike, that these women they don't even want to have kids from their own genome, their own lineage. It goes back thousands of years. It's scary. It's a scary, frightening thing that is being perpetrated on the United States by this bumbling buffoon. And look at Kamala Harris, Mike. There's a great example of the VP. She couldn't find a nice man, a darker man to marry. He's out with this guy who was married before to a Jewish woman. Now he's married to her. I mean, love is love. I understand that. Mark's from Carolina. He's right about that. He's absolutely right. Mark is right. If you fall in love with a different, fine. Okay, that's okay. I understand that. But Mike, they're actually promoting it. They're pushing it day in and day out. Every channel. It's just like they're pumped right in. If you don't do it, you are a racist, Mike. Nowadays, it's like if a white guy marries a white woman, Mike, they're racist because they married each other.
Yeah.
You understand the point?
I understand the point.
That's what I'm frightened about it. I'm frightened about this because, and Mike, again, all these cities, nobody's talking in the mainstream. You got that Max Headroom, BDI, Joe Scarborough, and that Zinka, the Morning Jews. They never even will talk anything about what's going on in these inner cities, the burning up the cities, the murder rates, the shootings. Mike, I believe already in the United States right now, since January 1st till now, if I'm not, I got to make sure. Maybe you can find a figure. I believe I just saw it was 3,700 shot, and I believe the number is, it's 764 murdered in all the big cities in the United States since January. I believe that was the number I saw.
That's a lot.
I'm not 100% on the murder rate. Yes, and that's, of course, where cities, those are inner cities, okay? And then you brought something up earlier, Mike, when you were talking about news. We're not even talking about the illegals that are going out, getting drunk, going around getting in these major car accidents. It's happening all over South Florida, Mike. It's crazy. I mean, there's accidents everywhere. DUI here, it's insane. And, Mike, I don't see, Kelly said, I don't think this is going to get better, Mike, until it turns out they're shooting war. Because it's not. It's not going to get better because these people are not. It's like the locusts, Mike. After 17 years in Africa, when those locusts swarm and they eat up the cornfield, what happens in those countries where they eat up all the crops? What happens to those people? They have famine and starvation, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Yes.
And, we're going to have that here because in addition, you've got the illegal immigrants pouring across the border at a time when everyone is saying there are going to be serious food shortages here in the United States because of the drought out west, the collapse of the supply chain. There's been a lot of perfectly usable food that's just been, plowed under on the farmlands because the farmers couldn't get it to market.
Absolutely, Mike. Absolutely. Mike, I'll leave you there just thought. I know you got other callers. I would say over 95% of your callers are excellent patriots. They love this country. And, your broadcast is great, Mike. Your broadcast is awesome. And but, there are a couple shrills. But I got to say this. Everybody calls your shows patriots. You know what? And if I don't agree with them, Mike, you know what? I'll fight for their right to say whatever they got to say. That's how I roll, Mike. I may not agree with what you have to say, but I'll fight for your right to say it. And that's why we are living still supposedly in the greatest country on earth, maybe ever. But right now, Mike, they're trying to take all our rights from us, our freedoms. It's horrific what these demon rats are trying to get away with. And you said one more thing, I'll let you go, Mike. I'm glad that Cheney is getting booted, and her criminal father.
Yes.
Who went out hunting, couldn't even shoot the deer, so he shot one of his partners he was shooting with. Unbelievable. Look at that case, Mike. That's another joke. The vice president, he was on a hunting expedition, and he shoots one of his. I mean, it could happen, I guess, but
yes.
Come on, man. What a trip! And then you got this Les Cheney doing everything in her. I don't hear her going out on any of these major networks talking about the illegal invasion of our border. I don't hear her talking about, we're going to bring in 2 million illegals into Wyoming. That's what they should do. Let's bring 2 million into Wyoming and see how long Liz Cheney would get elected. Or bring in 5 million Indians in Delaware. You think Joe Bumbling Biden would have been senator, Mike? Do you?
Well, again, with the elections being totally fraudulent right now, it's entirely possible, that they're going to flood all these illegals into the country and still win the elections.
Mike, I'll leave you with this thought. Dade County does not have one white man or one white Anglo woman on the Miami-Dade County Commission. Broward County's only got 5 left. You understand?
Yeah,
That's
I understand.
The scenario. They're not coming here to compliment Mike. They're going to come over and take over the whole freaking place, and we're going to turn out what they ran away from into.
Well, out in California, there's one city, I forget which one it is, they actually have an illegal alien on the town council.
Yes, I believe that was that in Bakersfield? I can't remember. Yeah, you're right.
Could have been. Yeah. I thought it was someplace in Orange County, but it could have been Bakersfield.
Yeah, or it could have been Costa Mesa. Well, Mike, I used to go to Costa Mesa. I used to love going out there to see my brother. He had to eventually get out of it because he couldn't find no work. And Costa Mesa was a great place back even up in the mid-'90s. And, it was awesome. Even all that area. It was great. Long Beach, it was nice. But now it's all gone, Mike. That's all like gang-infested insanity.
Yeah, gangs and drugs and homeless and, illegal immigrants. Yes. It's like I was saying the other day about, I saw this recent footage from Venice Beach in Southern California, and it was a real shock because I remember what Venice Beach used to be like back when we shot Skate Town, USA there. And it was clean and a lot of really cool shops and, just, a really nice kind of buzz to the people there. And it's completely different now.
Well, there used to be Muscle Beach, too, Mike. You had Muscle Beach where all the bodybuilders go out there and the girls were all bodybuilders. And there used to be hundreds of my brother got there. You don't have that anymore over there. They don't have Muscle Beach or where the guys and girls would be showing off their bodies. They stopped most of that. I mean, the cultural shock that's happening in this country is going to be, I think it's going to overwhelm us eventually where it's going to be.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's going to be is culture shock. And, I think most Americans are starting to notice what's going on. They haven't reached the point of anger yet, but I think it's only a matter of time.
Well, Mike, one thing, Kamala Harris is going to make it worse than Biden when she takes over. It's going to be 10 times worse.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
All right, Michael. Thanks for taking my call. And everybody that called in right now are all Patriots, my book, Mike. They're all Patriots, every one of them, truly. And thank you, Layla, for calling me Paul Revere, because that's what we need. We need every one of us to be Paul Reveres. Let everybody know what's going to happen to our country if we don't save it. So, and in Canada and all those great places. So, anyway, thank you, Mike.
All right, well, thank you for the call, Tom. We got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And welcome back to our show, last segment of the program today. Now, on New Year's Day, actually New Year's Eve, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador basically came out with a decree that GM corn imports would be phased out over the next 3 years, and the ban includes not just corn for human consumption, but yellow corn destined primarily for livestock, and obviously together with that is a ban of glyphosate. Needless to say, American corporations are already in there trying to reverse that decision, and it's resulted in a coalition of 80 U.S. agricultural, consumer, environmental, public health, and workers groups petitioning the Biden administration, saying to respect Mexico's sovereignty and stop interfering with its right to enact health productive policies. Okay, we're going to go to the phone. Miles in Maine. Hello, Miles. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Yeah, that was an awesome call by Tom, and he's, of course, right on that immigration front. But I wanted to remind Layla that Tom is not, well, he could be the Paul Revere too, but Tom, like I have said, he is the AK-47 of talk radio.
Okay.
Spray and pray that he stops and take a breath so you can get a word in.
Yes.
But Tom is right on, and like he's saying, you got Dade, you got Broward, which only has 5, people who are Caucasian on their commissions and that. And you got to ask, if these people aren't the majority, if they're not the majority and they're the minority, even in those counties, how are they all getting elected ahead of others who are, white?
Well, Dominion voting systems, we guaranteed the results.
Yeah, and I think that's what you're looking at. Now, and here's another thing I was looking at. Before Trump even got elected, he had 11 assassination attempts on him?
Something like that.
And Biden's going on a half a year, and there has nobody has had any report of anybody, of anything going on with him? Nobody making any threats or nothing? I mean,
I think there was one when he first took office, but it was kind of half-hearted, more threat than actual action.
Yeah, and Trump, before he ever even took office, he had 11 different ones, maybe more. And then, of course, we heard about the various ones when he did get elected, but I just thought that was unusual. But you never hear of anything with Biden, And but of course you got these white supremacists running around, and you would think, that who knows. But I thought it was kind of unusual. So anyway, Michael, keep up the great show. Good to hear you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. And there's the music. It's time to wrap this one up. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please spread the word of Republic Broadcasting. Spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.